Good afternoon. It is the honor and very exciting, quite exciting, in fact, very exciting, that the Chief of Staff, Halevi, Lieutenant General Halevi, has received our invitation to share with us his ideas about the present and future. And I want to tell you that from a historical perspective, the Chief of Staff, in very challenging circumstances, let's say, is presenting amazing leadership based on many values. I don't want to take away from his time, so I would now like to invite the Chief of Staff to talk to you. Good afternoon. Amos, thank you for this introduction, and thank you for inviting me. And thank you for the opportunity. I am at a conference which is titled Strategy and Planning in an Era of Uncertainty. And I want to speak on behalf of this place. Professor Reichman is not on behalf of the university, but do allow me not to praise the university or the city of Herzliya, but I would like to praise Herzl. And it's not because of the name connection between me and him. Herzl has written about the state of the Jews, a very, very detailed plan of how it should be done. He wrote his book, Alt Neuland, Old New Land, as a vision. You need a lot of strategy and a lot of creativity and imagination to do so. I am distributing a joint volume of both these books in one volume to high-ranking officers in my staff, the Jews, Nation of the Jews, Land of the Jews, and Alt Neuland. And it has a lot of planning and a lot of prose as well. And in this spirit, I would like to speak of three things. One is I would like to analyze the situation, to give us an assessment and say some things following the last operation in Gaza about 10 days ago. I would like to talk about the multi-annual plan. The IDF is now at the beginning of a process of planning and designing a multi-annual plan that would accompany us in the upcoming years. I would only give here the very basics, the first things. And I would talk about issues of society and military. But first, to start with assessment, I will start with strategy. The world is at a very great dramatic changes and lots of crises, and this is happening at an accelerated rate. The uncertainty is rising, and to go back to the title of this conference, when we have more increasing uncertainty, the vision and strategy must be very, very clear. We must use this to understand that we need larger margins of security. When we look at the powers, we see increasing competition, especially between China and the States. And we see China having wills here, too, to have more of their influence. And more at our part of the world, we see Iran not a superpower, but a big country indeed. I will talk about it soon. Iran is in competition with civilizations. A very important book that was written at the end of the 80s, Huntington, the clash of civilizations. It's not a war against Israel, but not against the US, but rather against the West in its entirety and the presence of its values here in the Middle East. We see a war being waged in the world that many people thought such wars will not happen again in this area, the war between Russia and Ukraine. And I would like to mention two lessons taken from there that I believe, are very relevant for us as well. One is about modern warfare. Russia entered Ukraine as the 20th century militaries entered, and they met a decentralized powers as enemies as foes are being deployed in 21st century. So this clash created a very interesting situation and a lot of advantages for the decentralized foe. And I will talk about it when I talk about the multi-annual plans. The IDF needs to build itself in such a way that we'll be able to deal with decentralized foes in the modern warfare of the 21st century. And at the continuation of this talk, I would also draw in broad lines how should such warfare look like. The second lesson from the Russia-Ukraine lesson is not modern. It is old as the days of, as old as wars are, which is the spirit of war. We see in this war that dry balances of power on paper have turned over in the face of a certain spirit of warfare, and that spirit is something so important, if you will, a spoiler for my conclusions at the very end. So defense of the State of Israel must remain a mission of value of the whole nation, of the state, a supreme mission, so that everyone is harnessed to the spirit of the war regarding that. I listened to you, head of NSC, regarding the states, and I would like to strengthen that from my own military angle. U.S. is our most important ally. It's a strategic ally. We want it with us along our side for many years in the future. Alongside with that, in the face of changes in the world and acceleration and changes in the world, the State of Israel must build itself, must also know how to do on its own more, and we would always want to have partners who are stronger than us, especially the U.S. The good example, a good example for opportunity. We went recently to Israel from the responsibility of the American-European dominance to the central dominance of the U.S. They are also responsible to all of our foe states, and we have now opportunities, and we have peace accords in the future, and maybe also in the present, maybe also in the future. And this is a great opportunity. The U.S. can receive here a more meaningful influence without more investment by helping Israel creating accords with other states, which is also very important for us. I will just say, to summarize the strategic part with their eyes forward, that Israel and IDF are perceived in our area as very strong, but indeed we do not have the privilege to assume that one of the arenas will be quiet and calm for the upcoming years, which means that we must be prepared. And I will now speak of these arenas. I'll start far ahead because this is where I would like to start, which is Iran. We are now looking at Iran through two prisms, which is the nuclear and the local threat. With the nuclear, they've advanced in the last few years by enriching uranium more than ever, and we are examining very closely the other fields as well on the way to nuclear abilities. And without going into details, since I don't have enough time, I will tell you that we see negative potential developments in the horizon that might bring into action. We have the abilities, others have abilities, and this is a very significant, important point. When it comes to the local aspect, Iran is involved in anything that has to do in our surrounding and everything that is against us, both in directive, in knowledge, in money. Every foe that we meet on the way, in some way or another, we can see the footprints of Iran. We have the ability to hurt Iran. We are not unaware of what Iran is trying to do and build around us. And I would allow myself to say that Iran too cannot be unaware to the line that we are presenting. There is a phenomenon during the past months of some countries around us approaching Iran, and I don't think it is a result of the fact that these states respect Iran or trust it or do want a peace accord with it or believe that they are able to establish such an agreement. I believe it is the result of their desire to lower the temperature in the surroundings and not bring up any conflicts, which is their choice. To finish with the topic of Iran, which will also be useful for me later on when I speak of the multi-annual plan, I would like to talk about Iran in 5 numbers, 5 coordinates. To everyone who wants to understand this threat for a moment, for Tzahal, for IDF, Iran is far away. It is 1,500 kilometers from us, depends where you start measuring for Air Force as well. 1,500 meters is not simple. The IDF was built to conduct warfare in our backyard. We don't have expeditionary forces, it's not in our military culture, and we must build those abilities. Iran is big, it's 70 times the size of Israel when it deploys its abilities all over this domain. We need to know where things are to be able to hurt every point on this huge geographical domain. It's a different challenge than we faced before. It also has a big population, tenfold the population of Israel. It has a very big economy. It's undeveloped. Depends how you measure the national product, the GDP or GNP, by different methods. I will not go into that. On one hand, they are close to us. On a different kind of measurement, it seems a bit bigger. But the fifth number that is important is our opportunity. The product per capita of Israel is almost four times the per capita product of the Iranian economy, which is our opportunity because this is quality. And I will now move on to Lebanon to speak about the representation, the strongest representation of Iran around us. So we look at Lebanon. It has its own problems, economical, social, very difficult problems. They're at deep, deep crisis. And I would like to talk about strengthening and deterrence, especially about these two. So the broadening of Hezbollah in Lebanon is a central challenge for us. We stop them, we slow them, it's hard to keep them on the zero, on nothing. But so we need to do two things. Always make sure that we maintain and even increase the quality gap between the rate of our preparations and improvements and theirs. And the second thing is to always consider a time for any initiative that might bring an advantage. The second term I mentioned, deterrence, I want in 60 seconds to put some order into it because people use this word a lot and it is a relational term. When I say now that I'm deterred from going to run marathon at noon when it's very hot outside, it's one thing to say, but I am not deterred from running 5 kilometers outside right now. So deterrence is always in relation to something. And in that spirit, I would like to say that Nasrallah does not run marathon as far as I know, but I would like to say that Hezbollah is very much deterred from an overall war with Israel. It thinks, it understands how we think. This thought brings Hezbollah to dare and challenge us where it is sure that it will not lead to an overall war. I see that as a good path to create surprises in times of need. We have good preparedness to fighting in the northern arena, and it improves on a daily basis. That being said, I must also say that we should know to keep our feet on the ground, that an arena in the north, in the front home, would be difficult. We would know how to deal with it, but it would be very hard on us. In Lebanon, even 7 times harder, and for Hezbollah, even more than that. And I think that in the current situation for the civilians of Lebanon, it will be very, very extremely difficult to come back from such war. I would move a bit to the east now. I want to talk about Syria. It's a country who's been changing greatly during the past decade. It starts coming back to itself. It's a long way. I can't say that it was the last shot that has been taken in this civil war. They have a strong affinity to Iran. Iran is using Syria as an arena for potential warfare with Israel. And we, as I said, are not unaware of it. And I would like to also mention to Bashar al-Assad one interesting datum in a time where people speak a lot about data. Each country during the last many years that stuck with Iran is today underdeveloped, ruined, with no future. And if he wants to now cling on to them after the civil war, he should take that into his attention. There is an interesting development lately. Last week, Bashar al-Assad came for the first time in 12 years to the Arab League, and Assad, who survived by the skin of his teeth with Syria all battered behind him, maybe hesitatingly starts going back into the area. It would be very interesting to follow up on that and see if we have an opportunity between those other Arab states from the Arab Leagues and the influence of Iran over Syria. A few words about the Palestinian arena. I will first talk about the West Bank and after that about Gaza Strip, and I would try to also cover the Palestinian Authority and the terror organizations. There is an increase of terror attacks at the West Bank and from West Bank for the last reason. It is our duty to analyze the reasons for such increase. The younger generation in the West Bank who did not experience the previous operation thinks that with the terror that would bring them great results. And second, the Palestinian, they don't bring much to their residents, which brings a lot of frustration. And the third is that frustration comes from everything happening there in relation to us and to the world. And that is what stands behind this increase of terror. Unlike what I've done before about West Bank, I would like to first talk about tactics and then finish with strategic conclusions. Thwarting terror. The IDF works very resiliently to thwart terror in the West Bank. We are going everywhere. I see these operations in the West Bank from different roles. Since I was a simple soldier and up to my position today, it seems that my last position in Tzal. And I see it in different perspectives due to that. And I must say that lately we've been seeing operations where the risk level is very, very high. The forces are dealing with it thanks to the professional ability and thanks to the values, no less than that are very high. And this is very impressible. And the IDF units, the border control that are doing that, and I think that we all are enjoying better security thanks to that. Every terror group, every terrorist who is planning to execute a terror attack or have executed will eventually meet the IDF forces. And my strategic insight to end the part regarding the Palestinian Authority and the West Bank. At the West Bank, at the strategic level, we must avoid two situations. In the lack of any positive task that we could navigate to, not only because it's due to us, we need to execute a method of negative navigation. Where do we not want to get to? There's chaos do we want to control chaos in West Bank, or do we want to be dealing with Hamas taking power? In the Gaza Strip, we are conducting within a strategic triangle, trying to conduct stability in Gaza Strip. And of course, we keep an eye on the enveloping settlements of the Gaza Strip and all over Israel. So at the top part of this triangle, we have deterrence and the preparedness to be ready at an unstable area. That must be the first at the bottom of the triangle. So we want to stop them from becoming stronger. We don't want to see increase of their abilities. We are able to deal with it overall pretty well, not excellent in an excellent manner, but pretty well. And the third part is the humanitarian effort that is also helping us to stabilize Gaza in a deterred state in the civilian reality that we should call stable, but with an unstable core. And it's very important to keep that within the triangle. And after I have so well described this triangle, I must explain what happened 2 weeks ago and why this triangle was broken down. First, we've seen the Palestinian Islamic Jihad. They want to deteriorate the situation even since before Ramadan, during Ramadan. And we did not want to stretch that for a long time because that causes a lot of difficulty and anguish, mostly to the Israeli residents of the settlements enveloping Gaza. The rockets 2 weeks ago was a strong, clear trigger in the middle of the day that it is too much and must be stopped. We've been asked a lot whether with the assessment there, and why do you think it was the jihad and not Hamas? So Hamas is a terror organization. I think this is what it was, this is what it will be. I don't think it will change. We would like to have someone else to deal with there, but I don't think it's something that we see in the horizon. We have civilian tools as well as military tools to work with Hamas. We are attacking in Gaza every time we need to harsh, effective assaults. The Guardian of the Walls created better conditions for the future attacks, and we have civilian tools because Hamas is in charge of the civilian reality in Gaza, taking care of 2.2 million of population. And since this wheel that went off track was the Islamic Jihad, we went very focused to attack it. It's important for me to say that speaking to the state levels after the rockets shot at Sderot, they met us and they said they want a different reaction. And I must say we were ready in advance, because our job is to always predict any such developments into the future and be prepared for that. And these things, in fact, met very well and matched. And during the operation, also on making the decisions to start the operation, we've had very good discussion with the Prime Minister, with the Minister of Defense regarding that operation. It started with an initiative which buys us a very important advantage. We first hit the heads of the jihad, of the Palestinian Islamic Jihad, and not because of what they have performed in the past, but because of their future intentions that were developing. And once we have a high-ranking terrorist that is doing anything it can to kill Israeli populations, including children, they become someone we must eliminate. And at the beginning, we threaten, then we put forward messages, and if that's not enough, we are hurting them. And in this operation, we hit 6 of the highest ranking of the military branch of PIJ, and other activists as well from the PIJ during that operation. In relation to other such operations in such high condensed urban operations. And believe me, I don't feel lightly about anyone unrelated to terror who was hurt on this collateral damage. And so the results are quite important regarding that. And I would like to say a couple of words about the question of hurting the collateral damage of hurting people who are uninvolved. And if I had to say one thing, it would be this, and I will say it, and I completely stand behind it. We do anything in our hand, anything possible, to avoid hurting any children, women, and anyone uninvolved. But the other side must understand we work within an arena that has a lot of uncertainty in it, and we try to reduce it all the time. The tension between the need to perform that task and hit that terrorist because of what the terrorist wants to do, and the true desire, very strong desire, not to hurt anyone uninvolved, not to cause collateral damage. This tension always exists, and I'm telling you, as someone who took some of the decisions, at the end of the day, within this tension, we need to make our decisions. When we have terrorists that are assimilating themselves into the population as part of their strategy, if we don't find a way to hurt them, we would be accepting the fact that they are killing our people, which is not something we're willing to accept. And I would like to mention that a week and a half after we've completed this operation, we are now in Tzahal with the General Defense Forces. We are conducting investigations regarding any uninvolved civilian who was hurt and how could we have avoided that. And the other side sees the 80-year-old woman they killed in Rehovot, the greatest achievement of this, and maybe the only achievement of this operation. And this is the way of the two parties. This is how we will not change it. This is how we continue to strive and to aspire to do it with minimal damage to uninvolved civilians. And I think that if you would have seen the people in the intelligence operations, those who investigate and perform and prepare everything, you would have been very much impressed to see how responsibly and carefully it is performed. And yet, of course, we will never be able to have full certainty. Within this operation, our achievements became greater and greater. We had amazing intelligence achievements that allowed us to hit another high-ranking target and give them the feeling, the foes give them the feeling that any day this operation continues would be very harsh on them, which is something that when you fight against someone, you want to give them that kind of feeling exactly, of course. And I would like to give one example of Yad Husseini. We have killed him on a Friday afternoon, and on Monday night before that, he was appointed to take the place of someone we've shot during the first hits. and someone else who was involved in the terror attack on Beit Lid and on Dizengoff Center, where they killed many people, but not because of that. That wasn't for vengeance. It was because we've seen his plans for the future. And I think that the ability to do all that afterwards and not at the very beginning, without killing any uninvolved civilians, very accurately in many high-story buildings, but only in one story, that is it. I don't think anyone thinks this is a simple task to perform. Let me tell you that it's very much not a simple achievement, and not everybody does that. I think they had high achievements on defense. And I think that in the Air Force is speaking for itself. On the land, we've had good achievements. The southern units protected very well the surrounding settlements and allowed the civilians to have better routine within this deterioration and escalation. And I must also mention that the civilians living there in the south are so resilient and they behaved so amazingly. It's always an amazing partnership for the achievements of defense and generally. In a moment, I will speak about military and society, but from this operation, I want to extricate one point. I didn't think that at the very beginning of my position, I would have to decide whether or not to cancel a show at the Yarkon Park in Tel Aviv. And I would like to tell you about how we've made this decision. First, I think that when you face terror, it's very, very much so the right thing not to surrender and continue on the daily routine. And that's the best way to deal with terror. But we can't stop there because we must also be responsible. And after that, we've analyzed very professionally, and we looked at the threat, and we knew that we must give 3 levels of very strong defense, and we also need to give authorization to this concert. 2 days after that in Rishon LeZion, we've had a different kind of threat analysis, a different geographical location, and we did cancel a concert there. It's very matter-of-factly. I don't want to surrender to terror, but at the same time, I must check what is the threat and what is the responsibility that we have over citizens and civilians, and I think it was a correct decision. So we've had achievements from this operation. We have deterrence also locally, geographically, and I think that makes this operation very important achievement, very clear achievement, and it's still very important for me to say, Gaza is still complex. We are not done with it yet. It will remain complex in the future, but we can now say it is more deterred at the moment.
In this operation, we managed to express the power of the IDF, the regular forces, the reservists. Everybody came and when they were called, and everybody did an outstanding job. And now I'd like to talk about the multi-annual plan of the IDF. The IDF is developing very well. I think that since the Second Lebanon War, the IDF has been engaged in a process of adapting the capabilities to the wars of the 21st century. These are wars against terror organizations that are turning into terror militaries in a changing environment in which the enemy is mainly disappearing and hidden and doesn't appear in regular formations that you can actually see. We're trying to develop the IDF in the form of tier above tier, floor above floor. I benefit from the decisions of my predecessor, and it is my job now to add another floor to this beautiful building that benefits from the floors beneath it and could serve better years ahead. This is how an organization develops in a healthy manner. And as I try to look at wars deep into the 21st century, 50 years ahead, and I'd like to say 3 words plus another word that is part of the 3 other words. What do I think is the right way to look at the wars in the future? And this is how we would like to build the IDF's force. The first one is knowledge in a world of information revolutions and in a world of AI. We want to make sure that our warfare is based as much as possible on knowledge. The second word is accuracy. Accuracy and knowledge makes your combat very accurate. You can hit whomever you want. Don't waste resources on things you don't want, and don't harm anyone you don't wish to harm in complex environments. And the third element is power. There's a lot of psychology involved in the battlefield. The enemy has to feel that what you're doing to it is extremely extremely hard for them, and your power has to be manifest. And I wrap all three words with flexibility, because the wars of the 20th century were wars that the main element in them was geography, and geography is not that flexible. As we all know today, the wars are enemy targeted, capabilities targeted. It's all a matter of risks and opportunities, and anybody who's more agile, anybody who can respond more quickly, will probably reach better results. A lot has been written on how progress will affect wars. Will there be keyboard wars of robots at the front and people with the keyboards at the back, and perhaps not even that? Well, I don't think so. I don't wish to talk about 50 years in the future, but perhaps I can say that over the next 20 years, technology will have a great impact on the phenomena of war, and human beings will remain the main element. I have to add that I hope so. I don't only estimate that, and we have an opportunity here, like I said, and we determined 4 main principles to this multi-annual plans. The first one, the first main topic, is people and society military relations in Israel. And I'd like to briefly address several concepts. First of all, the People's Army. This has been discussed at length recently, and I would like to say here very clearly, the People's Army, even when not all the people are drafted to the military, this is what gives the IDF a high-quality echelon of commanders with an emphasis on combat. Through this broad funnel that all Israeli teenagers pass through, enable us to get people to encounter this, to mobilize them, and to keep in service the very best ones. Anybody who thinks that we can stop this model of mandatory conscription must take into account that immediately after that we will experience a drop in the quality of those who serve in the military. It will be a great mistake that will bring with it a tremendous damage, and I think it's an irresponsible thing to do in our region. Certain areas, certain countries and other regions stopped mandatory conscription, but I would not recommend doing so in our neighborhood. We would like to recruit from all sectors, from all communities of Israeli society as much as possible. We should aspire for that, even if we reach this goal very slowly, very gradually. And I call upon the ultra-Orthodox Haredi population and the ultra-Orthodox leadership to encourage conscription a bit more. We have some excellent tracks. Some people have finished their military service and they came out of the military service no less Orthodox, very good citizens, better people for their families, for their communities. I think everyone benefits from that. Thank you very much. Another thing, the second topic, we wish to keep those who are most suitable in the IDF. We have excellent people today, exclamation mark. We want to be able to say that 20 years from today, and these decisions are being reached today, because the people who go today for the officers cadet course will in 20 years become brigade commanders. Wherever you have good commanders, good soldiers decide to stay and command, and we mustn't harm this chain. And in this multi-annual plan, we want to further elaborate our discourse with Israeli teenagers and to truly make sure that the best young adults in Israel come to commanding positions. With respect to the reservist, I think it is a wonder, and it a wonder where duty and privilege meet together in harmony. The reserve section allows the IDF to grow quickly whenever needed, but it is our duty in this contract to train and equip these individuals. It's our moral duty. I see in the IDF a tremendous opportunity for the Israeli society in cohesion, in their contribution to Israeli economy, in social mobility, in strengthening weaker places. Indeed, it is truly the broadest common denominator here in Israel. So that's for the first main topic. The second main topic is Iran and the multi-dimensional or multi-arena contending with it. I already spoke about Iran. We have capabilities to face Iran. They're already good, but we need to further strengthen that. We need better capabilities. We need more quantities so that we can be engaged in a broad campaign with Iran and to make sure that it's highly effective and to make sure that this campaign is as short as possible. As for this multi-arena scenario, a situation in which we are combating in several sectors, in several theaters simultaneously, it's much more complicated, because if you're playing tennis and you're playing against 4 or 5 other players on the other side of the court, it's a much more challenging match. But I'd like to say something very, very clear here. Israel will not wage this war the way it wages a war versus one theater. We have very strong capabilities. We have a lot of strength. And if we need to play against 5 players or 3 players, our use of force will be at a much greater magnitude and intensity, because the scenario is a much more complicated scenario, and this is a complete change in the way we consider preparation for such a conflict, for such a clash. The third main topic, I'd like to talk about maneuvering and our borders. A lot of questions come up. Do we still need maneuvering capabilities in an era in which good intel and an accurate bomb can reach everywhere? Once again, I go back to psychology, and I'd like to say that there's an issue when there's an enemy that knows that they can feel the boots and tanks of its enemy on their territory. This is very important in order to deter. There's a certain level of achievement in a war that without maneuvering one simply cannot obtain. And now we need to say what is the kind of maneuver we would like to see. And I go back to the wars of the 20th century, and this is not what we want. The modern maneuver in the 21st century wars includes 3 things. It benefits from a good intel as much as possible. It benefits from precision fire. So fire in intel provide a very good supportive layer, and it helps the military to know where to go, and it makes its actions much more effective. They encounter an enemy that has already been weakened, and it can create erosion relations that are very good. And this is what we are aiming at in over the next few years, and we will further elaborate this, I do hope, in the next multi-annual plan. Strength in the borders. In recent years, and I hope that in the future as well, you know, the country, our economy is becoming stronger, and the trend in the neighboring countries are opposite. So we need to have strong borders so that we won't experience migrant workers or others storming our borders because of water. It's best if we can send our people to help on the other side than them entering Israel, and of course to make sure that we prevent any terrorists from entering. Another issue is operational culture. I'd like to talk about 2 words: responsibility and initiative. Look, I can sit today, let's say tonight, early this morning, there were some complex operations in Judea and Samaria. I could sit in my office here in Tel Aviv and open any camera the IDF has anywhere, on a drone, on a high pole near the border, sometimes even with a soldier that has a camera on his helmet. And I can see any operation as it occurs. It seems to be fantastic. It means that you can manage your organization very easily and technologically. You can know everything that's happening at any given moment. And let me tell you something. I never did this, and I'll try to resist doing this until I finish my position. Because if I do that, and if my subordinates know that I do that, what I'm indicating to them is that I don't trust them, and I highly trust them. We have excellent people at every level. There's a tremendous advantage to somebody who feels with all 5 senses what's happening in the operation, and doesn't need to give the responsibility to decide. I can prepare them in advance to say, I can approve this, I can approve that, but you decide on the ground. This issue of mission command, as we call it in military language, is very important to us, to develop an operational culture that any commander, low-ranking or high-ranking, sees himself the last and first address, a comprehensive 360-degree address to all the needs of their soldiers for every need they have. And this is my expectation of my men, the commanders. Even the youngest commanders that I meet in the IDF today project to me yes, we can carry this backpack on our shoulders, and this is what we're aiming at, and I think we can go there. After having mentioned the four main topics at the day in which there's a process to approve the budget of the State of Israel, I'd like to say over the past 18 months, the IDF, the Ministry of Defense, and the Ministry of Finance have been all engaged in a very thorough process to somehow address and fix the budget on certain things. There's an idea in the budget that allows the IDF to develop in view of the challenges I just mentioned. Of course, we cannot fulfill all of our dreams, but it enables us to develop well. There are some changes regarding the mandatory service, those that enable the IDF in combat that's becoming more and more complicated, to keep the soldiers longer in those positions where the training is longer, and to benefit from a short but top quality service in other positions, and then to release them to their next phase in the Israeli economy. And this has a high economic value. It's a good balance that maintains the People's Army model, because everyone will serve, of course, as much as possible. With respect to career officers, we want to maintain the existing situation, not to lead to any collapse in what we have today. We want to, of course, to introduce some new things, people who look at the modern labor market, but there's one emphasis: the IDF cannot be like a train station. Today in the labor market, in the job market, people switch jobs every 2 years, but we need to have longer periods of time in each position, and we've tried to find, and I think we did manage to find, along with the Ministry of Finance, solutions for that issue. Now, for the last topic, I'd like to talk about issues of military in society as we look into the future mainly. In the past few months in the Israeli society have been complex. One could even say that they were difficult, because in the IDF, we decided to call it, after the establishment of the State of Israel, the military of the people, the army of the people. And of course, everything that the society experienced had an impact on the IDF. We managed to keep the IDF different in the conscription army, but with the career, with the reservists, it's more complicated, because the reservists, most of the year, they are civilians, and then they come to us for 1 month. Since this was a very complex situation, we defined 3 very clear goals. The first and most important one is to maintain the preparedness of the IDF every day for every scenario. We live in a region that the IDF cannot say, not even for 1 day, we're not sufficiently trained or prepared. So that was challenging. Another thing was to make sure that we keep the IDF cohesive. We wanted to have good cohesion within the unit so that they can work together. And the third thing, to leave any disputes outside the military. Just like I said earlier, with respect to the reservists, it was more challenging. We have a unique reservist model, and it's a good model, but this model of the People's Army, we need to tend to it very cautiously. This is why one cannot use the reserve duty for any purposes that are not security purposes. Our unwritten contract with the reservists, the way I see it, they come to serve whenever they are summoned without any reservations or conditions. When there were exceptions to this, we reacted, and we acted in order to make sure that the IDF is constantly sufficiently trained and prepared to preserve the reservist mechanism. If something worked well for 75 years, not to spill the baby with the bathwater, and to make sure that the reservists, who definitely merit great appreciation, all of them, and I never check anyone what their opinions, views are, not where they live, not what they do in the civilian life, but anybody who wears uniforms and come to serve us, I always praise them. In the past 2 weeks, we've had 95% people who came to their training duty. It's a very impressive percentage, and it's truly heartwarming in this country of ours. It is not something that we take for granted. And what we wish to see in the future, to prevent mixing people's views as civilians and their service, reservist service. Once such a mix begins, even a small crack track, then people can, every person can find his or her own motive not to come to reserve duty. The IDF's vocation is the security of the State of Israel. The clearer it is that the IDF is here to protect the State of Israel, then our teenagers and our enemies are all going to respect us in the near future. Now I'd like to summarize with 4 points. In 3 days, May 26, it's the IDF's 75th anniversary. This is the date the IDF was founded in. The IDF was established 75 years ago as a defensive force of the State of Israel, and it must remain so. And looking at the world, and especially looking at the Middle East for the upcoming decade, we will require to be strong in order to continue and flourish here, in order to always deter and to win whenever necessary, to achieve victory whenever necessary. The People's Army is a main key to this resilience. Military service must remain a national matter, a duty, which is a vocation. As for force design, force build-up, the changes around us compels us to build additional capabilities on top of what we currently have, and larger amounts than what we currently have. And we mustn't postpone this, because these processes take years. The IDF is a great opportunity for both the State of Israel and the Israeli society. Like I said, the broadest common denominator that needs to be maintained and protected and remain outside of any dispute. And I'd like to finish with a story. I've been in this position for 4 months, and between the Memorial Day, the Holocaust Remembrance Day, and the Remembrance Day for the fallen soldiers of the IDF, and Independence Day, we chose one day because of the cohesion problem we face, because of the social complexity, and because of these special days, Holocaust Remembrance Day and the Memorial Day. We took units from all kinds of units to take a journey to travel on the IDF trail. This is a trail that passes through dozens of combat heritage sites throughout Israel, because we do have so many sites. And I walked on the train with reservists from various units, from the Givati brigade, soldiers and commanders from the Air Force, Tel Nof base, and soldiers from the commander unit, reservists, female soldiers, male soldiers, conscripts, officers, everything. I walked on the trail. I spoke with the soldiers. I spoke with the commanders, and I have to say that I was very satisfied, and everybody felt satisfied. Everybody in all capacities feel that they're important. They all feel that they are contributing, and they even want to do more. And there was one soldier who said to me, "Sir, can I ask you a question?" And I said, "Yes, of course." And he said, "I really want to go to the officers cadet course." And I said, "Fine." He was in the army for only 3 months. I didn't know when I was 3 months in the military that I want to go to that course. And he said, "I'm telling you that because I want to bind myself, to commit. I know that once I say that to you, I'll make a greater effort to succeed." So we scheduled a meeting to his officers cadet course graduation ceremony. In about 12 or 18 months, we have some outstanding individuals, and it's very important that we keep it like that for the future as well. Thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen.